أنا دكتور خالد وليد، ربان سفينة النجاة إلى شواطئ بكة القدس. I am Dr. Khaled Waleed, the captain of the ship of salvation to the shores of Baka, Jerusalem.
All right, so get ready, because we're about to take a deep dive into some pretty unconventional ideas about the Hajj.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be looking at a website and a bunch of study guides and FAQs that present like a whole reinterpretation of this really important Islamic pillar.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they even get into the financial side of things, which you don't really hear about that often.
Well, that's interesting. What's particularly, I guess, intriguing is that these sources, they were all written by people named Khaled Waleed and Waleed.
Okay.
And they actually challenged some pretty fundamental assumptions about the Hajj.
Yeah.
Including, like, where the Kaaba actually is.
Exactly. That's where it gets really interesting. Like, they just come right out and say that the Kaaba isn't in Mecca.
Oh, wow.
It's in Jerusalem.
Okay.
Now, I know that might sound kind of crazy to some people listening, so
right.
Let's break down their reasoning, see what evidence they're using, what do they got?
Yeah. Well, their argument basically hinges on a couple main points. First, they introduce these two terms, al-Hadi and al-Khalid.
Okay.
And they say these are like essential parts of the Hajj that have been either lost or like people just totally misunderstand them now.
Okay, so break those terms down for me. What are al-Hadi and al-Khalid?
So they define al-Hadi as basically any donation or charitable contribution that you make during Hajj.
Okay.
But it's not just about like giving money. They really emphasize that these funds should be used to fight global poverty.
Gotcha.
And create a more just world. It's like a built-in system for social justice, you know, within the pilgrimage itself.
So it's not just like a personal spiritual journey, you're saying.
Really,
it's more like a collective thing.
Exactly.
To make society better.
Yeah. And then you have al-Khalid, which they describe as like these permanent charitable endowments. So think of things like real estate or company shares or any other asset that you basically dedicate to supporting, like the house of God and its mission, you know, for the world.
So al-Hadi is the immediate giving.
Exactly.
Al-Khalid is more of a long-term investment.
Right.
Both aimed at like creating a better future for everyone.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah.
But how does all this connect back to their claim that the Kaaba is in Jerusalem?
Right. Well, they argue that this interpretation comes from a super close reading of certain verses in the Quran. Specifically, they focus on the language that's used when Allah talks about making the Kaaba a place of pilgrimage. And they draw attention to this idea of jal, which means transformation.
Okay, so transformation.
Yeah.
Like a shift.
Exactly, like a shift from one thing to another. And they say that when Allah makes something new, the old version is basically like, it's done.
Oh, interesting.
It's obsolete. And they apply this concept not only to just where the Kaaba is,
okay,
but also to the whole idea of safety and security that's associated with that location.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So they're saying if the Kaaba has been transformed and moved to Jerusalem,
right,
the old spot, Mecca, it's not relevant anymore.
Exactly. That's exactly their argument. And they actually call Jerusalem, they say Becca or Baka al-Quds in their writing.
Interesting.
And they even go so far as to say that Jerusalem should be the center of like all global affairs, scientific, cultural, financial, everything. Like it's the ancient United Nations.
That's a bold claim.
It is.
Reimagining Jerusalem, not just for Islam, but for the whole world.
Exactly. And it's that vision, right, of Jerusalem as this true center for humanity that really ties everything together. So if you take their financial ideas like al-Hadi and al-Khalid and you think about them in this context, it kind of paints this picture of a global system, right? Of giving and support and all of it flowing through Jerusalem.
So they're not just saying like, here's a new way to think about religion.
Right.
It's here's a new way to run the world.
Exactly. Like a new model for how we can take care of each other.
Wow. That's fascinating.
And create a more just world.
But to really get this, we need to dig deeper into their reasoning for putting the Kaaba in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
What's the evidence?
Well, they kind of weave together these scriptural interpretations with these historical arguments.
Okay.
For example, they really get into like where the word Kaaba comes from. They trace it way back to like ancient Semitic languages.
Okay.
Where it meant things like high place or sanctuary.
Interesting.
And they argue that this original meaning, it actually fits better with how Jerusalem looks, up on a hill,
Right.
than with Mecca, which is pretty flat.
So they're basically saying, look beyond the usual stories.
Yeah,
Think about different ways to see these sacred places.
exactly. And they're not afraid to, question the accepted timeline of things.
Okay.
They suggest that the Kaaba was actually in Jerusalem first, before it was ever associated with Mecca.
Wow.
And they use historical accounts and archaeological evidence to back that up.
That's a bold move, man.
Sure.
They're going up against centuries of history and tradition.
It is.
Makes you wonder how other Muslims feel about all this.
Yeah, well, it's important to say that their views aren't exactly mainstream.
Right.
It's definitely a minority opinion, and it's caused a lot of debate and discussion.
Of course.
But even if you don't agree with their conclusions, you got to admit that their approach to the scriptures and history is pretty interesting.
It definitely makes you think. What I find really striking is how they take these historical and religious arguments
Yeah,
and they connect them to this bigger vision of global unity.
right.
It's not just about proving a point. It's about offering a whole new way to see the world and our place in it.
Exactly. They see Jerusalem as a meeting point for all of humanity,
Okay.
a place where all these different cultures and faiths can come together and work together to make things better.
Yeah.
And their financial ideas, al-Hadi and al-Khaled, are a big part of that vision.
Right. They're saying that if we move these financial practices to Jerusalem, we can create a more fair global system, one where resources are shared better.
Right.
And poverty is tackled at its root. It's like they're proposing this spiritual and economic revolution.
Yeah, and they believe that revolution is rooted in the very heart of Islam.
It's interesting.
They emphasize the Quran's teachings on social justice, compassion, and taking care of those in need. And they see their financial model as a real practical way to live out those principles.
I'm curious how they see this actually working.
Yeah.
Do they give specifics?
They do. They outline this framework where al-Hadi donations would fund development projects, support education and healthcare,
Okay.
and provide direct help to the poor. Imagine a global network of charities and NGOs,
Okay.
all working together through Jerusalem
Right.
to end poverty and make a more just world.
That's a powerful image.
Yeah.
But wouldn't putting so much wealth and power in one place create its own problems?
That's a great question, and it's one the authors don't really address directly. I think it's important to remember that they're presenting an ideal model here.
Sure.
A vision of what could be. Putting it into practice, that's a whole other story.
For sure.
There'd be tons of challenges.
And what about other religions?
Right.
Would they have a role in this system?
That's another area where they're kind of vague.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about their message being universal, but they don't go into detail about how it would work across different faiths.
Sounds like there's a lot more to explore here. But it's clear that they're pushing us to rethink the role of faith and money.
Yeah.
And how we work together as a global community.
And they're doing it in a way that connects these ancient traditions to modern problems. They're asking us to look again at what we believe.
Right.
And to imagine a future where spirituality and social justice go hand in hand.
It's a powerful message for sure.
Yeah.
But we've been talking a lot about their financial stuff.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears a bit.
Okay.
What about some of their other interesting ideas? Like synchronizing the world's time with Jerusalem.
Oh, yeah. That one's fascinating. It kind of gets to the heart of their idea of unifying humanity around a common center.
Right.
Both literally and symbolically.
So it's not just about praying in the same direction.
Exactly.
It's about, living in sync with each other.
Right.
But how would that even work?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be chaos?
Logistically, it would be a huge undertaking.
Right.
Changing time zones, calendars, travel schedules. It's hard to imagine.
Yeah. Not to mention the cultural clashes.
Oh, for sure.
People are pretty attached to their way of life.
Totally. But even just as a thought experiment, it's powerful.
Right.
It makes us think about time in a new way.
Yeah.
About these lines we draw on maps. And about the possibility of creating a more unified world.
It makes you wonder, what would it take for everyone to agree on something so fundamental?
That's a great question.
What shared vision or purpose would be strong enough to overcome the challenges?
Those are excellent questions. And they show just how complex it is to create a truly unified world. But maybe that's the point.
Yeah.
Maybe the authors are just inviting us to imagine what's possible. To push the boundaries of our thinking.
Right.
And consider different ways to organize ourselves.
And speaking of pushing boundaries,
Yeah.
they also have some pretty unorthodox views on other parts of the Hajj,
Like what?
Like where Safa and Marwa are, the hills that pilgrims run between.
Yeah.
They say those aren't even the right places.
Oh, right. They say Safa is actually in the mountains of Tursinin in Jordan,
Okay.
east of the Dead Sea. And Marwa is at Tursinai in Palestine,
Wow.
west of the Dead Sea. They say these locations match the descriptions in Islamic tradition better,
Okay.
and that the ritual of running between them has a much deeper meaning in this context.
It's incredible how they connect all these different things.
I know, right?
Scripture, history,
Yeah.
geography, even social and political commentary. They weave it all into this really compelling story.
It really shows their intellectual curiosity
Right.
and their passion for re-examining what we think we know.
Totally.
They're not afraid to challenge the status quo,
Right.
and they offer a vision that's both radical and inspiring.
This deep dive has really made me think in new ways about the Hajj
Yeah.
and about its impact on the world.
It's amazing what you can discover when you start questioning the things we usually take for granted.
Absolutely.
It really has been a fascinating exploration. And you know what? It strikes me that these authors, they're not just presenting like intellectual ideas.
Right.
They're actually giving us a call to action.
That's true. They're not just content to reinterpret these concepts.
Yeah.
They want to see them put into practice. So what does that look like?
Well, they urge their readers to reconnect with what they believe is the true Qibla, the direction of prayer
Okay.
in Jerusalem. They see a global Muslim community all united in prayer towards Jerusalem,
Right.
symbolizing this return to the roots of the faith.
And they talk a lot about purifying the holy house too.
Yes.
It almost sounds like a rally cry.
Yeah, there's definitely this sense of urgency in their words.
Right.
They believe the holy house, and by that they mean where the Kaaba is in Jerusalem, has been hidden, both physically and symbolically,
Yeah.
and that it needs to be reclaimed
Right.
and restored to its rightful place as the center of Islam.
So it's more than just an academic debate for them.
Way more.
It's a real mission.
It's a spiritual calling.
But they also say this purification should be done peacefully.
Yes, absolutely. They're very clear about that. They're advocating for a peaceful and intellectual revolution,
Right.
a shift in consciousness.
Okay.
That'll lead to a natural change in priorities and practices within the Muslim community.
So it's not about taking over.
Right.
It's about winning hearts and minds.
Exactly. It's about getting people to see the world the way they see it.
Yeah.
And to embrace this vision for a unified and revitalized Islam.
Their ideas are definitely challenging.
Yeah.
But they really make you think. They make us reconsider our ideas about the Hajj,
Yeah.
about Jerusalem's role,
Right.
and about the possibility of a more just world.
It's been great exploring these ideas with you.
Likewise.
And I hope everyone listening will be inspired to keep the conversation going, do their own research,
Right.
and really engage with these ideas.
Because that's what these deep dives are all about, right?
Exactly.
Expanding our horizons.
Challenging our perspectives.
And understanding the world a little bit better.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
Could these reinterpretations, with their focus on Jerusalem and this new approach to the Hajj, could they really help create a more just and unified world? Or are they just utopian dreams that'll never come true? That's for you to decide. Until next time, keep diving deep.
أنا دكتور خالد وليد ربان سفينة النجاة إلى شواطئ بكة القدس. I am Dr. Khaled Waleed, the captain of the ship of salvation to the shores of Baka, Jerusalem.